So we can call this budget workshop to order on Tuesday, April 14th, 2020 at 5:32 p.m. Is there any public participation? Okay. Who would like to begin conversation? Mr. Conzo?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you all for being here tonight. I think you've all received the copies of the documents that are before you. Nothing's changed since I sent that out to you Friday evening, and you've seen the revenue projections before. We talked about those earlier, and nothing has changed with those. As I noted in last week's meeting, there's probably going to be a need to make revisions to these. We just don't know what those revisions are going to be, and we probably won't know until 2 or 3 months into the new year. As you also know, the appropriation is done during the month of July and must be completed by the end of July and filed with the county clerk. I would expect at that time we'll need to make some revisions to the budget based on what we know about the disruptions that may occur to these revenue streams. And even after that, we may have to make revisions to the budget based on those things, because we're still fairly early into this pandemic. We talked about several of the lines in the expenditure lines. I don't know how you want to approach this, if you want to go through this line by line or sub-fund by sub-fund, or if you just want to start at the beginning and we go through it page by page, and if anyone wants to comment or ask questions, we'll try to answer them. As I mentioned last week, thank you. As I mentioned last week, Alderman Hoynacke, Alderman Horn, City Administrator Cavalman, and I worked on this budget in a committee, and I think that process worked very well to have a committee working on it, which is something we haven't done for a long time. The projections, as I also noted last week, the projections for the revenue were based on the trends from the current year to date, and then I scaled them back somewhat. Just being realistic, I don't think we're probably going to see the growth that we were seeing, at least not in the short term. In the long term, we might, so I did scale that back. When we re-examine this in July, and subsequent to that, we can make adjustments to these budget lines based on that. With that in mind, the recommendation that I think goes without saying, anything that even if it's well allowed for in the budget, if we don't have to buy it right away, we should delay buying it until we need it, rather than saying, well, we've got it in the budget, let's spend it. We should wait until the time that we need it before doing that. And the other thing, as I've emphasized too, we would certainly want to avoid incurring any debt in the upcoming year. With that in mind, I guess we can start with page 1. You see the animal control contract, that subject to change. I understand the county's about a month away from having that ready to go, or having that finalized. The audit fees based on the audit contract and what we anticipate that'll be needed in preparation for the GASB reports. Municipal, those other things there, municipal retirement contribution, social security contribution calculated on the salary cost. Sirens, as always, is just kind of a estimate. Transfers, I guess I don't need to read each and every one of those. Those transfers, reason for those are explained in the expenditures connected to those transfers are explained in each of the funds when we get to the fire pension, police pension, equipment rental, capital projects, and so forth. Following that, liability insurance, we took the premiums as we know them to be and calculated them with possibility of some additional increase there. That's something we have really very little control over, so I don't know if there's much we can do with that. City clerk is here, and if she would like to talk about that, I would be happy to. No, you can see she did a very, very nice job of cutting back on several lines in her budget, and it's reflected there in those totals of reduction of almost $14,000. By popular demand here, when we did the appropriation last time, there were some requests for me to separate out the costs for the city treasurer's office. I did that. The one thing that'll stand out there is probably the printing and publishing, and that is certain documents, like the notice for this budget hearing, for example, notice for the appropriation, for the public hearing, not for this meeting, the notice for the public hearing for the budget, the public hearing for the appropriation, the annual treasurer's report, the tax levy notice, which is always in the paper in December, public hearing associated with that. All those have to be published, and that cost is based on what we've paid in previous years with little additional money to account for possible increases in those. Alderman Keller, did you?
Yeah, excuse me, Treasurer, thank you. Back to City Clerk, this is for you or for Clerk Bateman. I know software, we've had some issues with that in the past. Do you project anything any software updates that would be needed here that might be more costly than what we project?
No, we don't see that there be any.
Okay, so we're all good with that now,
Yep.
because I knew there were some kinks in that for a long time, but that's finally,
Yeah, and it's
Good.
been a while since we've even had
Sure.
to call them.
good. Okay, thank you.
One thing there, and you'll notice as we go through the budget, you'll see these lines for the telephone. We've done is separate that out to the police chief. In his other job as the IT person here has found that we have outdated breakdown of how those were done, and in so doing that, we've the cost for this is a cost for not a separate phone line, but for an extension to the city clerk's phone. Approximately right now at about $328 a year. Did account for possible increases there, and you'll see that telephone line throughout the various sub funds in the budget. City administrator's line there, corrected that. I did have previously included in that was her vehicle allowance. That was incorrect, and so in the document that you have, that's been taken out of the salary line and has been put into the travel and training line. Although it's paid for as compensation through payroll, it does come out of a separate line in the budget. And that's, I guess, the only change since the last time we looked at it. Building and zoning, you see there, very, very small increase accounted for by some increase in salary. We had talked about that demolition and cleanup line moving that up to $90,000 to take care of problem with the Kickapoo Street garage, or what remains of the Kickapoo Street garage. We further discussion with the building and zoning superintendent decided the council, I think the consensus was, and he was in agreement with that we should hold off on that in view of the possible disruptions to revenue streams that we may see in the year ahead. Crossing guards, I know we had increased that with the possibility of adding a second crossing guard, and we did that in the appropriation for the current year. Yes, Alderman Hoynackey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Conzo. I was just backing up. I was going to reiterate a little bit what Wes stated during our meeting on that building, Kickapoo Street
Right.
building. He says that it is a sound building. It's not going to, his opinion was it's not going to fall in anytime soon. It's just more or less of an eyesore for everybody right now. So currently, he said we could probably hold off because of our uncertain situations going on right now. So that was the reasoning on that. So thank you.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. The others, those of you who are on the committee, two of you are here. I know city administrators on the telephone. If you want to jump in and comment on any of these, please do so. I don't need to cover the whole thing myself. If you want to talk about any of this, please do. Merit Commission, nothing there. We cut the salary lines back a little bit because with those various commissions, and we had not been using as much as we had in those lines for salaries. The commission expenses has to do with testing, and we left that there because that varies from year to year. And even though you might not use as much in one year, and the next year you might have that. This on page 4, top of page 4. Mayor and city council, again, significant reductions there. You'll notice the telephone line there hadn't been using as much of it, and we lowered it and then kicked it up a little bit because not necessarily by mistake, but by the way it was set up, the phone that's here in the council chambers had been included in the city administrator's telephone line, which is not accurate. It should be under the mayor and council line, so that's $350 of that $4,000. And these, Madam City Administrator, did you want to comment? I didn't mean to overlook you there on the previous section, your section of the budget. Okay. Okay. Well, let's see. Legal services, yeah, that's been discussed. The legal contract is set. We did reduce the labor attorney expenses. There are no contracts coming up in the current year as there were last year, or I mean in the year ahead, so we did not budget as much there. Contingencies, I think pretty well self-explanatory. Thank you to Chief Adams and Chief Stanovsky with help with that too, and Superintendent Landers. Again, you see a reduction there from where we were last year. Fire Department, I don't know, is Chief Stanovsky on the line? He is? Okay. Oh, I see him. I mean, I see his picture. Chief, did you want to comment on that?
I've talked to everybody that's been on the council. The line numbers, I think I've justified what needs to be done for this year. If there's any discussion about it, I can certainly put my mask on and come across the hall and have a discussion with anybody.
Okay.
All good.
All right. Again, very, very good, I think very sound budget and contained the costs very well. We talked previously about the addition of firefighters later in the year. That will not happen for at least 3 years, excuse me. Let's hope not 3 months into the fiscal year, which time the council would have to approve that, and I certainly hope we're in a position where that can be done. Police Department section, again, I think very good containment of costs there. Chief Adams, did you want to comment at all on?
No, I don't think I have really anything at this point, just trying to put into the budget that extra officer if we do get that grant, but if that grant doesn't come through, then we won't have that expenditure, but it's in there to pay for that, and I don't, based on my figures, that should be a more accurate number than what we had in the past, so that was actually a savings there. Not sure if there's anything else I need to explain. Anybody got any questions on that?
Chief,
Chief?
question, is that grant, is that a state grant or is that a federal grant? I don't recall.
That was a federal grant.
Greg? Thank you. Building and grounds, you can see there a reduction in the costs, some of the expenses there too. A lot of that depends on what breaks, and that can have to be amended periodically. Contractual services, no change there. Economic planning and development, no change in those lines. Did talk briefly with Alderman Welsh today, and I guess I'll leave it to him to explain his idea there.
On which line item are you talking about?
Under economic planning and development on page 7, the third Friday line.
Oh, yeah, very briefly, we've looked at how much money we've spent in past years, and I know we put 5,000 in there. The committee had talked about somewhere between 5,000 and 6,000 this year with some other things that we'd like to try. We're trying to change the event up and make it a little bit more exciting, so we'd like to ask if we can bump that up to 6,000. We don't anticipate we'll use it all, but we'd like it there just in case.
There's no objection. I'll change the document prior to the final documents submitted for your vote next week to include that.
I'd like to go back to building and grounds. I know we don't have the money, but I would like to know if someone could get an estimate on putting a roof here on City Hall. Every time there's a windstorm, we're missing shingles and patching in areas. And I think Bob, last time it was missing, Bob found out that there's no warranty left on it. If we could just get an estimate on putting a roof on City Hall, then we at least would have a number. I know it wouldn't hold steady forever, but at least we would have a number that we can work with on trying to put back that money, or if everything holds steady in this budget in building and grounds, we might, toward the end of the fiscal year, have the money to repair the roof, so we don't end up in a precarious position where we have roof leaking all the time, if that's possible.
Did you want to change the budget to reflect that, or did you want to wait and see what
Um,
develops?
if we could get an estimate, then later on down the road, if it looks like we got the money to do it,
I doubt we could get an estimate by Monday, but
probably not. Well, you might. You know, there's a lot of hungry contractors out there right now. I would like to find out and if the historic preservation would let us put a metal roof on the building, those, since they have the metal roofs now that look like shingles, and 40 councils from now, nobody would be talking about the roof. It would be a one and done type thing. Get an estimate both ways.
Put something in appropriations, like, you know.
yeah, that's what
Yeah.
I was thinking too, in appropriations, and then we can amend the budget accordingly. I mean, it's doubtful. There might be a lot of contractors, you know, that be eager for this work, but you've got that, you know, going out for bids and that whole process too, where it's, and also as you mentioned, the historic preservation guidelines figure into that. But I think it's a great idea. I just don't think we can do it in a week, but
As long as we could just get a couple bids here in the next few weeks,
yeah,
so that we know what we're looking at down the road.
I think that's a good idea. Okay, I guess back to the third Friday, is that council the desire to do that, to amend it?
Yes.
And I'll talk more about this when we get to tourism, but I think anything we can do to sell more things here and bring more people in, I think is certainly a good idea. Streets and Alleys, Superintendent Landers, there he is on this big screen. Did you want to say anything? You're okay?
Oh, Chuck, you're doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. You can see very, very modest increase in his budget. Most of that has to do with salary costs, which are figured in contract and for the most part from the contract.
Do we want to explain that salary increase, and because that's going to go between your department and Wes's, correct? Walt?
I can explain that, yes.
Okay.
So basically, we've had a part-time administrative assistant here at the municipal services building that Charity, she's been working with both departments, so she works between building and safety and our department. And she has been a great asset, and I believe that she can help other departments too with her talents that she has. And moving her from a part-time to a full-time position, we think it's a plus for the city, just because of her skill sets. And it could, you know, very well be an asset to us. So that's why we're looking to do that. And it may not be just between, the building and safety and the street department. She can also assist other departments, and those would be billed back to those departments also, so, we might not brunt the full force of that, salary. But, she's there and available to do those things, and we can, definitely use her here.
Thanks.
And I will point out that's offset too by reduction of one full-time person to part-time. And so as a result of that, you're really not incurring additional cost. Person who was full-time will not have city-provided health insurance, where this person who is going to be full-time would be eligible for it. So that one offsets the cost of the other, as does the salary. Trash collection, nothing much to say there. Gone but not forgotten. Leave it at that. Health benefits, you see considerable increase in the cost there, and there isn't much we can do about that. So a lot of that, you notice the HSA benefit, large increase there. It's because of the change in the amount offered for that as a result of agreements with the various collective bargaining units. That has changed the selection that many of the employees have made for their health insurance, and they've gone from the HMO or PPO into the HSA. So that's why there's an increase in that particular line. Overall, though, the cost of health insurance everywhere is going up, and as a result of that, you see that. General fund, you see the total increase there of $274,000. Over 112,000 of that is the health insurance alone, and about another 90,000 of that, 95,000 of that is the liability insurance. So there's most of your increase right there, is between those two sub-funds, which we really have very little control over. Most of the others are either show reductions or very modest increases. That pretty well summarizes the general fund. Moving on, the motor fuel tax. Superintendent Landers, did you want to talk about that, or? He dropped out.
I guess only if there's any questions that, if anybody has any questions about anything.
Wes, I know you hadn't said anything so far. Did you want to say anything additional about the building and zoning?
No, I don't think so. Like I said, I'd like to eventually tackle the Kickapoo Street garage, but as you stated and Jeff stated, it's not going to fall down. It's not a danger or anything. I had a drive-by estimate, roughly 35 plus to tear down and haul off. I think that's light, first off, but also we're going to have to deal with the parking lot itself. Once the structure's gone, there's going to be some serious reworking of that grounds just to get it usable or safe for that matter. So I was leaning closer to 60 grand, and hopefully that would do it. But like we stated, I don't think it's a high priority right now with regards to the financial situation we're in. So.
By the way, my apologies. I didn't know you were on there until I figured out how that screen is set up there. I didn't realize you were on there when we went through that portion, though. I think I figured
my
out.
My video's not working for some reason.
Yeah.
Paul screwed it up, I think.
Well, Walt kept kind of fading in and out, but now.
One thing I was looking at today, we did raise the postage up. I think we only did it $250. That has a lot to do with the fact of the trash letters. However, as we stand right now, I'm going to be over even that amount. I talked with Peggy, and there's a little bit more postage coming our way yet in this budget year. So right now I'm already over even a couple $100 more in that line item would help.
Okay.
That has to do again with the trash mailings.
Kevin?
Has this city council ever discussed selling the Kickapoo Street garage to someone who would develop it into something? I mean, they would have to do the repairs, but we wouldn't have the expense of tearing it down then, and it would be put back on the tax roll. I didn't know if we just put it out there to see if someone would want to buy it. We don't have to accept any bid, but if we're just going to tear it down and make a parking lot, what if someone would like to buy it and make a warehouse or something out of that? We got a lot of construction companies in this town that have lots that they put stuff on. We got, what brings back memories to me is old Charlie Beecher would buy every single building in town if he could to put cars in. But it would at least put it back on the tax roll, instead of us just tearing it down and making a flat parking lot that we then have to maintain and keep weeds down on.
It's worth a try, isn't it?
I think I wouldn't be against that, except for we'd have to heavily scrutinize what the use is going to be for, because that's a main corridor to the community on Route 66. I mean, no offense to people who collect cars and things like that, but we don't want to see it turn into a scrap metal yard on that road.
I mean, we have the right, if we put it out for bid to, Seth does real estate, you talk to the people, and what is your plans for this building? And see if it meets anything that we would be acceptable with, or write something in a contract to where the part that faces 66 has to stay. I mean, obviously, I'd want the whole building to stay maintained, but at least presentable and stuff in buying it.
Yeah, that'd be kind of hard because you really can't discriminate when you list a property or market one. And then obviously once it becomes theirs, they can really kind of do what they want. So, I mean, that'd be the only concern, I guess. I don't know how you'd really limit, who it would be.
They could turn around and sell it to someone else.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, I think it's a good idea for sure, but I don't know how you would really patrol what a future use would be.
I just think it would be better than an empty lot that we have to maintain and spray. And obviously we've got other buildings that are in disrepair around this town. At least this one we can control what the asking price is, who we would sell it to. Obviously it's a gamble, but to me it's better than spending $60,000 to tear it down and then turn around and spend money every single year maintaining the lot.
I agree with that. I think it's worth looking into.
I think it's beneficial to keep control of the lot there. I think it could be a future development as far as a parking lot, whatever we want to do with it. But I think in conjunction with the downtown and where it's at, I don't believe we'd want to lose control of it.
Hello, hi, this is Beth. Can I speak whenever it's time?
Yeah, that's.
Sure.
Okay, I guess you discussed my budget. I was trying to connect through the phone, and then I tried connecting through the Teams, but all it had was a red line across there. Then it did pop up after the fourth try, but so I can hear you very well, and I can see you. I don't know if you can see me or not. But, I received an email from Kevin, Alderman Bateman, this afternoon, and he asked about kind of an analysis of some things that I had expenditures. So without me being present when you discussed this earlier, could someone recap what was talked about so I don't repeat what we were talking about?
I don't think anyone had any questions.
We didn't discuss it because we were hoping you could get logged in and just come back to it.
Okay, well, I'm here whenever you want to talk about it.
Let me say first, we did talk briefly, the phone line, the phone line that is now the council, that's the extension that's here in the council, had been showing as being charged to your line for telephones, and that's changed with this budget. Chief Adams was able to figure all that out when he went through and reviewed the phone lines. My phone line apparently was also, so that's been separated out. So those, in other words, your budget had 3 of the not for phone numbers, but 3 extensions in it. Now it's going to have 1, which is
Do you have any idea how much that was?
well, it's about $328 per line.
Okay. Well, per line, so that comes out, what, 900 some odd dollars?
Well, you'd still have 1 of those 3. You still
Okay,
have.
so, okay, 654. Well, then I'm only $100 over budget for the entire year, plus I'm $9,417.52 to the good as far as appropriations. So I'm $100 over on my budget, and and my budget also was decreased by $15,400 from the previous fiscal year. So we're pretty tight this past year, and I don't know, I tried watching as much as I could. I am a tactile person that has to have papers in front of me to function, and I have used a lot of paper, but I've used it for printing the Fifth Street Road stuff, getting those files straightened out, and I'm pretty much to the end of that. Plus, I went back and got copies of all the budgets, printed those out. And then now Paul started me on using the two-way, so a duplex copy for each page, so that's going to help. And then having the new printer we purchased is going to be a great help as well. And the $37 per month contract versus paying almost $600 or $500 a month for, well, not that often for cartridges, but those cartridges from coast to coast were expensive. So I did email everyone a copy of everything that I put together this afternoon. Kind of threw it together after Alderman Bateman asked me for some explanations. Peggy'd gone through and marked down how much paper I'd used and all that, and I do realize I've used immense amount of paper, but I've also produced a lot of things that people don't know I'm working on. I've been working for the mayor as well as economic development and some of those things we can't express yet to people. So that's how I function. I'm sorry, but I do think I've done pretty well staying within my budget, except $100 I went over. If that's the case with the 3-line extension on the telephone.
Hey, Beth, this is Steve. I got a question for you. With the paper that you print, where does the majority of the paper go?
Where does it go? It is going into some of my files. Now, I brought some home with me because I'm going all the way back for the Fifth Street Road budget, clear back to 1996 forward. So I've recently printed quite a bit of those out. I'm working through them. I've also, all the contract stuff that we had on the land acquisitions. Then, when contracts come through, I make a copy of that stuff, or when I get an invoice that comes in from our...
So my question, I guess, is after it's been printed, where does the majority of the paper go? Does it go into a file? Does it go into a trash can for recycle purposes? Where does it go?
File, or if it's an old contract, like we've scanned things for the mayor, if he's not able to come in and sign, he'll come in and sign then. We scan that to him, and then he scans back to us, and then I tear up into shreds or whatever, the little piece of paper, the papers that he was to sign off on that he signed and scanned back with his signature on it. We've kept that. But, I don't know. I'm doing the best I can, and I don't know. It seems like I'm just being asked certain things, and I don't know what else I can do to help. I didn't do a lot of traveling or training. The last 2 years have gone to a free Rural Affairs Economic Development Conference 2 years in a row, and that's been very beneficial. We've got some really good information from that, but I don't know. I'm open for suggestions if there's something you can help me with. I asked for a part-time assistant. I think that would help to cut down on some paper usage, but if I could just say, I need this done, or can you go work on that, or whatever, then I don't have to go make a copy and try to work on it on the weekend. When I'm home here, if Tom's not up here, I work on the weekend. So, I don't know what else you want me to do.
Kevin, do you have a question?
Well, my concern is that 1819, the office supply line was $800. And then when the new council was seated and we went through the budget last year, it was increased to $1,400. And most of that was, and the minutes will reflect that we put the extra money in there to purchase a printer to help alleviate expenses, which was done, and that was paid for out of the miscellaneous line item instead of office expenses. But now the budget has gone up another $100 to $1,500, and you're not asking for a printer. So I was expecting that the office supply line would be decreased because the printer had already been purchased. And
Okay. You mean
So
for
the-
coming forward, you mean, or for now, for this year?
the,
Moving forward for the new fiscal year?
correct, because the printer was purchased out of last year's budget. So I asked the city clerk both your office supply usage and her office supply usage. And the concern I have is the printer has already been purchased. We're bumping that line item up to $1,500, which is a 7.14% increase. And then just to date, you've spent $1,900. So if we spent $1,900 on a $1,400 budget, I don't see where bumping it to $1,500 is going to help. And we have nothing to purchase this year because the printer was already purchased. I know these are just small numbers, but if you look at an overall budget of many departments, the absolute only fair way to look at these and decipher these is to go by percentages. And the percentage increase in your budget after the corrections to the phone line is still 6.69%. So that's why I asked you if there's any other cuts we can make or how we can better streamline things to where we're not bumping that supplies and office constantly to a point where it's just it's almost double what it was 2 years ago.
Right, well, we will, work on that. Let's see, that's 5102, correct? I requested, let's see, where are we at?
5102, that is
I
supplies.
requested $1,000, so I dropped it down. Did you see that? And then, let's see,
No, 5220 is your $1,000. 5102 went from 800 in 1819 to 1400 in 1920, and now it's at 1500 for 2021. But your expenditures for the 1920, you're at just under $2,000.
right, but it balances out throughout the rest of the budget as far as you move lines around within your budget. I'm only $100 over my entire budget, but we did now drop with the contract was mid-year, and the contract we have with Minolta is for $37 a month now, where it was, like I said, explained earlier, we were paying a lot more for cartridges. But what I submitted to Chuck here a month ago or 3 weeks ago was $1,000 for my office supplies. And now I see it's been moved to $1,500, so I did not ask for that.
Excuse me, Madam City Administrator, we had this conversation on telephone after you did that, and that's what I based that number on what you had given me during that conversation.
The what now? The
1,500.
office supplies?
Yes.
5102, I've got right here, 5102, my budget was, you've got on here an asterisk by it for 1,500, but what I supplied to you was $1,000 for that.
So you'd like to reduce that to $1,000 instead of 1,500?
Well, yeah, I mean, I didn't ask for the 1,500, but I'm trying to think of what we did. Did we put that in with, let me look. Here. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
remember.
we talked about this on the telephone, and at that point, we went through after you had submitted the initial document that you sent to me to put into the budget, and that was one of them that we changed. We also, I think we reduced a couple of things there too, but that was one that you'd increased, and that was after I told you that you were already over
Oh, I know what we
1,400.
did. I know what we did. Excuse me. We added the Minolta city contract in with that 1,000 to make that the 1,500. There we go. You're right. You're right. We made that the 1,500, and that takes care of that $1,000 budget plus the $500 to pay for the $37 a month for the Minolta contract. $37 a month for that, so. Yeah, there we go. That's where it's at.
Okay, so,
So what other expenses do you anticipate in office supplies? Because if you look at your contract for Minolta, it's $450, and then based on at least your paper usage this year, you're going to be around like $400. So that's about $900. Are you just putting that $600 extra in case you have other needs in that area?
No, we can cut that back if we do. I don't have as much, like I said, to copy as I did before. This has been tedious going through all this. I mean, you've got to look at each of these papers, and you can't just, some of this stuff is smeared across that's been over the years, copied and copied and copied, and then scanned in. You can't read it right without printing it out. So I think I'm square with that.
So while we're on that topic too,
I mean, are we going through all this right now, or can we work on this tomorrow and get back with everybody? Or, I mean, I don't want to take up everybody's time with this.
We're pretty much done. We came back to yours, waiting to log in. We were at the end of the budget conversation when you got.
I explained earlier, I didn't have on the teams.
We
it was just
totally
plain red.
we're totally okay with that. We totally understand. That's why we didn't discuss your budget without you being present and able to chime in. So
Okay,
we're good.
So we've got me at a proposed budget of $65,995, correct? Is that what everybody has?
65,295 is what,
Oh, we took 700, I've got what you added up here was 65,995. Let's see what the other one, what you said.
well, we had taken those phone line, when we took those phone
Oh,
lines
yes,
out.
okay, how much did it take the phones off again? I'm sorry.
We took 700, they were running about 328 and figure the possibility of any cost increase in there at 350, so we took 350
700
times
off
two,
of the phones,
times
two
two,
phones.
right,
Okay,
700.
so now we're down to 65,295.
Yes, and also I should point out, it wasn't any change in the numbers, but, and you and I talked about this, I had previously included the car allowance in with the salaries. That was incorrect on my part, and we moved that, as you and I talked about on the phone last week. I moved that to the travel and
Goes into the.
travel and training. Pardon me?
Okay, the car allowance is not salary, it's a.
Travel and training, right? Even though it's paid out of paid through payroll, it's under travel and
Okay,
training in the budget.
okay. And then you put all my other things are in my salary that I had not included when I first turned that in because I didn't know what salary to put in there. So I just had gone with a 3% from last year.
Right.
What we'd had in there, but I don't know what.
The life
else we
insurance.
added in there.
Life insurance reimbursement is in there, and the deferred payment in lieu of deferred comp are included in that, and the telephone and the internet stuff is in the telephone line.
The cell phone, right? The cell phone, internet. Is
And the
same
Wi-Fi,
thing.
I guess
Yeah.
part of that.
Now that cost has gone up. Now I don't know if I can do something to reduce that more here at home. I know next month it's going up. They gave me 3 months lower rate for something.
Yeah, I have a question on that. So, your internet, or I'm sorry, your phone, your cell phone
Who's
use,
that talking, please? Excuse me, I'm sorry.
your cell phone, does that have unlimited data?
Who are we talking? Who's talking, sir? Who's talking?
It's Steve Parrott.
Steve, I'm sorry, Steve.
Okay, sure. Yeah, no, yeah, we've got, and Peggy established that today. She said that was unlimited, right, Peggy? Unlimited
So
charge
can,
or whatever for, yeah.
so for
We do
your,
not pay extra for usage. It is unlimited, she said.
and your internet is for what?
For working at home,
So is that like you're like a Comcast or a Frontier or something like that, or do you have an iPad?
Comcast, Xfinity, uh-huh.
Okay.
And they're going up, so I don't know, maybe we can work something else different. But it's pretty much as a wash.
And you have an iPad?
Yeah, I have an iPad, yes, I'm using, I don't use it as much as I should be probably. I am using what I bought for myself, was that my thing I ride on a lot, that's
Is
easy
it,
to.
does it have, do you use the internet at your home for that, or does that have internet hooked up to it no matter what?
No, I have to hook up to it.
No, the iPad, that's another one of the expenses I was gonna ask you about. So in trying to cut as much as we can, and I appreciate what you're doing, if we have unlimited unlimited data on the phone, and we're paying for internet at your house, we're also paying, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, $95 a month for unlimited internet on the iPad. No?
It's 59, I think, 50, wasn't it 50 something, Peggy, today?
The iPad's 3801 a month.
So 3801 for unlimited.
iPad, and her cell phone, her city cell phone, we pay
I
$56.34.
can't hear you, please, I can't hear you.
With the city cell phone you have, we pay $56.34 a month, and then the iPad for the internet and everything is $38.01 a month.
So I wanted to go back to I think where I was going to head with this is, can you use can she use her cell phone for a hotspot with the iPad so that she could use the data that she's paying for on her cell phone and run it through, and use it to connect to with her iPad, so we don't have multiple internet data connections through both of those?
Is that, you're talking about my city cell phone, using that city cell phone,
Yes.
connection? Yes. Yeah, sure, I'm open for anything. We want to look into this, further, talk about it. I don't know, I don't know what is, the city is allowing me as a perk $100 a month, and right now it's going up to 93, I think, or something. It's 79.50 right now, it's going up. So if there's something we can do, sure.
I'm kind of in agreement with Steve. It sounds like we're paying for 3 different unlimited internet connections, one for Wi-Fi at your house, one for unlimited data for the cell phone, and one for unlimited data with the iPad, which, if I agree with Steve, if we're using the cell phone, if you use the city cell phone the most, we should use that as the Wi-Fi hotspot to hook up your home computer and hook up the iPad. So we're only paying for unlimited data on one item instead of 3.
Sure, well, show me how to do it, and I'll be glad. I don't mind, whatever.
The only caveat of switching to a hotspot, Verizon has a 25 gigabyte limit, even on a unlimited plan. So once you get up to
Well, I
that
have my own
25,
hotspot here at home I could use when we travel, but.
when you
But
get
yeah,
up to
I
that,
don't wanna use my own stuff,
hold
yeah.
on. When you get up to that 25 gigabyte limit, then Verizon slows you down to like a dial-up, the old 56K dial-up speeds. So
That's right, they do,
you get to that
yes.
point, then it may not be usable at that point. So it depends on how much she's using it and what she's using it for at home,
Well,
which could cause an
I
issue.
use my iPad at work as well. I don't use it as much. You can see I haven't, because I've been doing other stuff that I haven't been, but I've also, like I said, I bought my little Remarkable that I use, and I go take that to meetings instead of carrying the laptop, and I guess I could be using both, okay, well.
Tracy, did you have a?
Into that, I mean, what time, when do we have to have all this budget thing ready to go? By Monday night?
Yes.
Okay.
Hey Beth, this is Tracy. So, I'm looking at your contract because that's what stipulates all of these amenities that you're afforded. And it specifies that the employer shall pay $1,200 per year, $100 a month to the employee in order to maintain the cellular phone, a tablet computer, expenses necessary for communication purposes. It also says that we will provide an internet connection at her residence that is outside of the $100 a month. So that's why her line item for telephone is so much, is because it's got $1,200 for the internet connection, or the $100 a month payable for the phone and the tablet, plus it's got the internet connection and the iPad. So this $3,300 line item is strictly communications is what it is.
Okay, so I'm trying to follow you here. 3,300, you said? Are you
Yes.
talking about the new budget, the old budget?
The
New
new-
budget we're talking about?
The new budget.
So we've got $4,000 for telephone, but you took the 700 off, so it's now 3,300, right?
Correct.
Okay, so what do you recommend we do here?
Oh, I'm just stating what that number entails. I talked with Chuck earlier today about some stuff, and this one came up as well. And that 3,300 actually covers what we're contractually required to provide.
Okay. Well, I'm not out to mess with the city. That's not my plan here.
No,
Whatever you need me to do, I just, all I know is I love to work, and I work. I work on the weekend. I even work Good Friday. And I'm just telling you, whatever I can do to help the city. If you need to cut it back some way, do that too. I don't know what.
Yeah, Beth, one more follow-up. I don't know that I'm actually requesting a cut here of any kind, but I would make a recommendation that if we are using a process where we print out a document, we have an individual sign it, we scan it in, and then we shred the paper, that we should look into some technology like DocuSign that'll allow you to just do that electronically and be a little bit more environmentally friendly. And I'm sure Paul can help us with that.
Okay. Sure.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
Sure. Whatever. So.
We'll talk more about it.
3,300 then, is that where we're at? Because of those two city lines, or we're still talking, Alderman Welch mentioned that other things were hooked into that figure.
3,300 is correct.
Okay. So, city treasurer, then we are at 65,295 right now?
Yes, that's my understanding, unless I missed something, and that's very possible.
Okay. And I do have a question. I wasn't here, and then I will be quiet. We have established that we are going to have a balanced budget, right? We're not going to have a deficit budget, because I think it's against, and I don't know if our city attorney can look into that, but it's against our code to go into a deficit budget.
Well,
we have to be balanced.
If you look at the revenue projections for the general fund and the expenditures, yes, based on the current projections,
okay,
they exceed the expenditures. However, I know you weren't able to dial in earlier, but I mentioned this last week as well. We're going to have to review all of this when we see what happens with those revenue streams when we get to the appropriation, and at that time it would be appropriate, if those revenue streams don't appear that they're going to hold up, that it would be appropriate to amend the budget accordingly. And I've checked. I don't know if you were able to hear on the last call, but the call from last week's meeting, but I did talk to the assistant legal counsel at the Illinois Municipal League about that, and her recommendation
that's good.
was,
Okay.
that we include some type of memorandum with the budget, which I will do, which explains what I just outlined.
And probably some of those revenue streams will be slowed down also by
Yes.
the COVID crisis.
Well, yes, that's it. Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's all I have. If anybody has any other questions for me. Thank you.
I guess we were on motor fuel tax. Prior to that, Superintendent Landers, did you have anything to add to that, or?
He probably ran away.
No, unless somebody has a question.
There again, that's, revenue stream. We'll have to see what happens with that when people aren't working, they're not driving as much, and they're not using as much gasoline. Although, if you do want to buy gasoline, it's a good time to do it because it's down real low. And As I pointed out before, the tax on it is the same per gallon, whether you pay $1.60 for it or $4 for it. We still get the same amount in taxes. But well, I fully expect that'll rebound after this situation with the COVID virus is over with. Debt service fund, you see there, there's not anything there that's flexible. We have bond payment. This is the 2020 general obligation bond. It's covered by the tax levy. It's a bond that we issue every 3 years, this being the most recent one, which was completed right at the start of the current calendar year. Then we've got the bond expenditures themselves, and what we've done there is we've taken the requests for some of the things that the fire department needed, and we've included them in there. There's also some technology and equipment, and some of these have to do with the camera system here. There's also amount set aside for street improvements, which doesn't have any specific project in mind with that. I had projected, based on what's generally good practice with a 3-year bond, is to spend about $200,000 of it the first year, $200,000 the second year, and the last $100,000 the third year. Those aren't, that can vary depending on your needs, but that's kind of how I had estimated it based on that. After consulting with the bond underwriters at the time that we issued this bond. I don't know if anybody, and Chief Donofsky, I know some of those, you had some requests there for some much needed equipment. Did you want to comment on any of that, or?
Sure. We talked about the washing machine that went by the wayside.
Mm-hmm.
We have replaced that already. The invoices come in for it, and we'll pay it out of the next year's budget line. There were some other things in there. We held off on pickup trucks last year. We earmarked $65,000 this year for capital project for either one new pickup truck or possibly 2 used ones if we could work out a deal after going out for bids for them. We have a grant out right now for $26,000 worth of new Humultro equipment to replace the 25-year-old system that we're using now that's hydraulic. It'll be a battery-operated system. If we don't get the grant, the money looks like it's been earmarked for later on in the year to purchase that equipment. I believe we had $12,000 marked down for new airbags, which they're at the replacement time on those. They're past their 10-year use. And I believe that was it. Is that correct, Chuck?
Yeah, that's my recollection as well, yes. Okay. If there's nothing else, anybody else want to say anything about that, or? No. Okay. Sewer O&M worked with Superintendent Bounds on this. He did a very nice job of providing some detailed information. I know that the members of the council have received that, and it provides a lot of detail on this. There's really not much I can say about it. I don't know a lot about how that equipment works, but he did provide very good and detailed information on this. And as you know, they're moving forward with the long-term control plan, and that's going to be a big part of this year's budget. City Clerk Bateman, did you want to say anything about the office sewer accounting and administration?
The only thing, just remember that sewer bills go out monthly versus the quarterly that it used to go a year or so ago. So that's monthly postage, monthly billing paper, monthly outside envelope, monthly insert envelope. So there's where a lot of expense that is, to keep going monthly. And that was done for the benefit of the residents so they could budget better and it can afford a monthly bill versus a huge quarterly bill when they changed the way the sewer rates were being hit.
All right.
Treasurer,
Oh,
I have a question. since we're talking about sewer bills, Peggy, did the folding machines that you guys have, what's the condition? Because my understanding is they're not in great condition, and the follow-up is, have we budgeted to replace if we need to?
No, the guy came and he gave us a quote. He would only give us $500 for the machine. We're gonna hash it out a little more longer. It's aggravating sometimes. Sometimes there's good months that it goes through and we don't have no issues, and then there's sometimes it takes us a while. But we're gonna suffer through it a little longer to see if we can. I didn't think $500 was very much to get back for it, but we're gonna deal with another year and see what happens next year.
Okay.
Or the next fiscal year.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, hotel motel tax, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. As I said, when this situation with the virus is over with, I think there's gonna be a lot of interest in tourism. I fully expect people are gonna wanna get out and travel and do things, and I think we want them to come here to Lincoln and Logan County as much as possible. So what I've done in there, not knowing what the situation is going to be, what I'm recommending here, I had increased that additional tourism projects and events up to 8,000. And the two reasons for that. One is what I just mentioned. I think there will be an increase after we get through this in tourism. The other thing is, too, we have a balance in that account now at the end of the year, which is coming up in about 2 weeks. That balance will be about $58,000. The only legitimate purpose for the hotel motel tax is to promote tourism. So I think this is a good time to spend at least that much of it. Perhaps you want to spend more than that. Increased, I don't know what the future is going to be for the Balloon Fest. And Mr. Mayor, I don't know if you know at this point yet either, but I thought it would be a good idea to increase that amount as well. And I think it's pretty well self-explanatory after that. But Mayor, is there any?
In terms of the Balloon Fest, it'll be similar this year to last year, so.
It's pretty much on the same time.
Yeah, exact same timing.
Good.
Same weekend, last full weekend.
This may be something, I don't know if conditions permit that we want to think about. You might want to think about spending more than that on. Got the fund balance in this fund, and this is a time, I think, this year will be a time to do everything we can for Route 66 tourism.
And there's quite a few other Balloon Fests that are canceling already. So if we're one of the only ones, I think we'll have more people in the area as well. So, Jeff.
Yeah, I just wanted to bring up real quick on the, excuse me, on the hotel motel tax to the tourism. If, for some of the newer members here, we talked about this in our committee meeting too. It is a percentage of the revenue that's brought in, so it's not technically the amount that you see there, and the fact that if the funds have really, the amount of hotel bed placements are really down a lot, revenue's down, that number will be down also.
Right. That's a good
Information.
No, it's a very good point. This year, I think we're going to come in real close to what we had projected for the current year, but going into this next year, that may not be the case because of a couple of months that are just kind of wiped off the calendar. So we'll have to see.
I was just asking about the Dock Dogs, 'cause I thought it was canceled already, correct? Or
Well, we canceled the Pigs and Swigs Festival. We had already given Dock Dogs the deposit that it takes to hold that event, which I believe is $3,500. So, and this is my first chance to talk about that event since it was canceled. We did consider moving it to the weekend of the Balloon Festival to try to keep the event going for this year. There was, as Seth would know, and Tracy that's been involved in some of these bigger events, a lot of the people that you ask to come to your event, that's what they do all year round. So after reaching out to our food vendors, Doc Dogs, and other people, and some of the competitors that travel the barbecue circuit, that was not going to work out to try to move it to that weekend. Doc Dogs is, believe it or not, Doc Dogs is in Springfield, Illinois that weekend at Shields. So we made the tough decision to just cancel this year's event. As you know, a lot of us on that committee are small business owners, and we just didn't feel it right at this time of need to stand there, knock on the door, wanting the handout, well, not handout, but the sponsorship that many of those individuals give, and the list is at least 50 businesses long. So that was the reason we canceled that, because it is the first week in June. But there was consideration about moving it to that weekend, but we have been assured that Doc Dogs has got us on the calendar for the first weekend in June in 2021, and we're hoping to be back as big and strong as ever for that event.
And I think when we left that in there, I think the thought was that if, assuming that does happen, as Alderman Bateman has described, that would pay that sponsorship out of the 2020, 2021 budget rather than the 2021, 2022 budget. And the only other thing I was going to add, if these revenues, for the first few months of the year, hotel, motel tax revenues are going to be down, you may want to consider some of that fund balance and paying that through to tourism to help them out. I mean, it's just something you might want to look at, but we won't know the details for now. But we do have a fund balance there that we could use part of for that purpose.
Tourism has lost state grants because of this. I'm not 100% sure how much, but I know it's in the thousands of dollars.
Wasn't it 30,000 annually? Was the state?
Yeah, I think they received some state grant dollars, I believe, but we're out quite a bit of money. Yeah.
I guess there's nothing else there. Sewer bond repayment, again, that is a scheduled payment. That was a 10-year bond. Originally was a 20-year IEPA loan. We refinanced it through an alternate revenue bond in 2014. The last payment on that is December 1st of 2023. So we're getting closer all the time. That's a substantial amount of money there too, $642,000 per year, and it's very close from year to year. And that's, as you see, it was 638 last year and 640 the year before, and it's pretty consistent all the way through till the end of that bond. Capital projects, Superintendent Landers, I guess I'm going to call on you again. Did you want to say anything about the streets and alley portions of that, which is the main part of it there?
So I'll be bringing information forward for the meeting next week with my recommendations for the resurfacing, which consist of the 4th Street and Decatur Street by Carroll Catholic, where the major sewer replacement was done, and then also Heitman Drive from Woodlawn Road back to past the truck stop and the candy store out on the west side. And basically that will, with engineer estimates, if they hold true, is going to take up our $500,000 budget. Sidewalk budget will continue with some of the work we started last year and move forward with it, with the stuff that we didn't get done, and we're going to leave that at $125,000.
Any other questions on anything on that? You see the Stahlhut Drive extension will begin there's an 8-year loan on that at 1%. Very good interest rate through the hospital, and we will begin making those payments this year.
And again, I'll have more information and a memo ready for next week's meeting so the council can review it.
You see the bond payments there too for the public safety building, police station. Nothing really. Land acquisition, that's the lot across the alley from the fire station, and that'll be finished this year. Those are the final payments on that. Library parking lot, probably nothing new is going to happen there, but that there's still $5,881 in that fund. All the state grants have been similar to that. This is a DCEO grant. It is suspended. There's no money for that. We're still eligible for it, and we have to file papers every year to remain eligible, but there's no funding available. The TIF fund, that's an estimate of the property tax increment, about $133,000. We are going to need about $42,000, almost $43,000 in transfer from the general fund in order to pay the TIF bond payments, which you see there. $175,968, pretty consistent from year to year on that. Equipment rentals.
Treasurer, I have a question for you.
Yes.
So we always every year have to have a discussion about the TIF, right? So the property tax increment for the TIF, the 133 that you've estimated in here,
Mm-hmm.
can you walk us through how you came up with that number? Because with the uncertainty surrounding the theater, I'm just curious how that's going to impact this number.
Well, in the long run, I don't know. As for this year, you know, the taxes that'll be paid on it or paid on any of the buildings in the TIF district are based on the tax year 2019. So I wouldn't expect that it'll go down much from what it was. However, you know, I thought that this year it would, because there was a foreclosure on that theater, and apparently that has taken longer than we anticipated a year ago. So I thought that when we did last year's budget, that by this year we would see a reduction in that. However, that sale was still I believe, been delayed due to the public ban on public gatherings, sheriff's sale of that building, and other properties. So I would expect that it won't have an impact on that until what we receive for the 2020 tax year, which would be payable in calendar year 2021.
I agree with that. Do we know when the sheriff's sale is going to be? They had to reschedule, right?
Well, originally it was April 1st, and then it was delayed to April 15th, and as far as I know, it's still uncertain as to the date. My understanding is this ban on public gatherings has...
They can't hold it yet.
Yeah, that's what I understand, unless something's developed there that I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
And it could very well be there is a date set, and I don't know, what it is yet.
Okay.
Equipment rentals, pretty well, we all know how we use that, and use that to pay for police, fire, street department vehicles. They're outlined in there. Police pension, we know what the pension payments are. There's a 3% cost of living for annuitants in both police and fire pension. That does not apply to survivor benefits. Those remain the same. And we know what the property taxes are going to be. The result of this is not a fund neither of these funds are in balance. And as a result of that, we're going to have to draw from the investments, as we have done in previous years. There is a consolidation of these funds, downstate fire and police consolidation. That's going to be was supposed to be about a 3-year process. It may be longer now. I expect a lot of these things are going to take longer than we had anticipated. So we'll have to see what develops there. And the last two, the Veterans Park, we've maintained that fund for repairs and improvements to that. That's worked out very well. And I would guess there'll be some expenses there. We do receive donations for that too. So all of the funds that are in that sub-fund are through private donations. And finally, what was left of the Community Gardens Fund, we still have in the budget about $4,800 for expenses pertaining to those or to landscaping. And that's it. Alderman Hoinaki or Alderman Horn, City Administrator Cavalman, did I leave anything out? If I did, please jump in. No,
No, you did very well.
Sounds good.
thank you, thank you,
Good job.
thank you, thank you.
Yes, good job.
Thank you for all your hard work, the whole committee. Appreciate that.
The committee all worked on this, we did a lot of work on it.
Does anyone have any further questions or discussion?
And I will say, City Clerk Bateman and her staff provided a lot of information too that made this possible. Spent a lot of time explaining those insurance rates, how they're gonna change.
Anything additional? We have a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Mr. Keller made the motion, Mr. Welch seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? This workshop is over at 6:48 PM. Thank you.